On the subject of evidence of global warming, there has been a major release of documentation and data out of the United States in the past 24 hours, which I think you should know about. I have on the line perhaps the world's most foremost authority on global world temperatures. His name is Dr. Roy Spencer. He's a principal research scientist at the University of Alabama and has been a senior climate scientist for NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. He's a recipient of the American Meteorological Society's top award for developing a global precise record on the Earth's temperature. Temperatures are his business. He's been awarded the NASA Exceptional Scientific Achievement Gong and has even received an endorsement in the Alabama House of Reps. If you want to look it up, it's Resolution 624. Dr. Spencer is also an author and through his website has released a book, The Great Global Warming Blunder. He has just taken a close look at how the Earth's atmosphere has warmed over the past decade, and it seems the models just aren't stacking up. So I get the feeling the science is not only not settled, listeners, it's crashing down in a million pieces. He's used NASA satellite information to make this informed assessment, and I'm pleased to say he joins me from the United States right now. Dr. Roy Spencer, thank you for your time this afternoon, our time.
You're welcome, Chris. Good to talk to you.
Tell me a little bit about the Great Global Warming Blunder before we talk about these latest temperature assessments you have made.
Well, the theme of that book, The Great Global Warming Blunder, is pretty much the same as the theme of this paper that we've just published. It's more evidence supporting the same thesis, which is that climate scientists have misinterpreted the role of clouds in the climate system as either being warming agents or cooling agents. You see, all of these long-term forecasts of a lot of global warming depend on the assumption that the little bit of warming we get from more CO2 in the atmosphere will be amplified by a decrease in clouds, letting more sunlight in and amplifying the warming. That's called positive feedback. And the work that we've published most recently this week continues to show that, if anything, clouds act as a negative feedback and actually enhance the cooling of the Earth in the face of any kind of warming influence like that from increasing carbon dioxide. So it's a matter of the blunder I was talking about in the last book was that scientists, I believe, have been mixing up cause and effect when they look at cloud changes and temperature changes of the Earth. When we see a warm year in the past, they have said, well, look, during a warm year, there's fewer clouds. Therefore, warmth causes fewer clouds, which lets more sunlight in, which amplifies the warmth. And what we're demonstrating is, no, you've got cause and effect backward, that there are changes in the circulation of the atmosphere, which are just due to chaos that cause cloud changes and then cause the warming. So it's a mixing up of cause and effect, and that's why I called that book The Great Global Warming Blunder.
So it's almost a reversal of cause and effect here.
Yeah. The theme is a mix-up of cause and effect, which frequently happens in science. You know, I tell people that you can have perfect measurements of the atmosphere on a daily basis, and scientists can still come to totally opposite conclusions about how things work, because it's much easier to make the measurement than it is to figure out what the measurements tell you in terms of cause and effect.
Isn't it interesting? I always think that there are so many variables when it comes to the planet and the globe being heated or warmed, and they might include information that we don't know right now about sunspot activity, information we don't know about clouds as well. And now our wealth of knowledge starts to shed more light on the role that clouds play in our global temperatures.
Right. Well, as you mentioned, Chris, the science is definitely not settled. I mean, we've had pundits and politicians tell us that, but the scientists that are actually involved in the research realize how much uncertainty there is. The trouble is that all of these scientists are sort of being herded by politicians that have specific policy motives in mind. This has been going on for over 20 years. I saw it start here in the States over 20 years ago. I even talked to at the White House to Al Gore's lead advisor on environmental matters, and he said that that they had managed to legislate freon, chlorofluorocarbons, basically out of existence, and that carbon dioxide was next. And this was just when the IPCC was getting started. It was clear that the whole process was politically and policy motivated, and that they were going to use the scientific community to further those ends.
It's clear from any of the research that we do that there are those who benefit greatly from continuing to be on the government teat in terms of finding that the globe is warming, that we need carbon taxes and emissions trading schemes and cap and trade schemes, etc., to continue their career. But it's also probably human nature that they don't like to lose face. So you've probably got so-called scientific experts in the United States who've been pushing this barrow for so long. But even when they find contradicting evidence, as you are pointing out for us this afternoon, they don't want to lose face and lose their reputation, do they?
Yeah, that's probably one of the motivations. I think a lot of them think that this really is the way things work, that they have the story straight, that global warming is going to be a serious problem, but what they won't admit is that there's a lot of faith involved in that. Because, see, I will admit that they have a plausible hypothesis, okay, but there's so many ways in which it could be wrong. I agree with them in a lot of areas of this. For instance, I agree that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. I agree that if you add more of it to the atmosphere, there should be some warming. Where we disagree is the amount of warming. Because, for instance, what we've been talking about, the way clouds change in response to that little bit of warming can make the difference between Al Gore's global warming Armageddon versus warming that's so slight that it's lost in the noise of natural climate variability.
Okay, the reportage of what you have found over the past 11 years and the data that you've looked at, which indicates far less future global warming will occur than the United Nations computer models. The reportage of that, how have the critics and the warmists reacted to your findings?
Well, I haven't heard too much except through a LiveScience.com reporter who called me today who said that she had talked to a couple of researchers out there and told me what they said, and I responded. But, people in this business almost never change sides. For instance, a lot of the work that we publish that does not agree with the United Nations on this issue is basically just ignored. It's very hard to get scientists to actually take the time to look at your arguments. That's one of the problems we've had for years, is that they are so close-minded. There have been a few of them who have looked at it and have agreed that what we're talking about is possible, but the vast majority of them have so bought into the narrative, the way they look at the world with their global warming glasses on, that they just refuse to admit that they could have missed something major.
And yet, within the past year, we've had other evidence come forward and be exposed that the sea levels in various shorelines right around the United States and Australia are actually decelerating, not increasing at the rate that the doomsayers have been predicting.
Yeah, that's the whole sea level thing is something that I don't follow too much. I mainly follow temperature, although the two are related. I mean, sea level rise is supposedly proportional to warming of the oceans, but that's something else that we're actually looking into now, and that we're hopefully going to get something published on in the coming months. Is I think everybody has heard about how the oceans have warmed. We've got these buoys out there that measure temperatures of the ocean down fairly deep. And we've got a number of decades of these kinds of measurements now, and it's true, the oceans have warmed. Yeah. But when you look at the details of just how much warming it takes, how much influence it takes, how much forcing it takes to cause them to warm, what you realize is that the climate system is telling us the same thing that we're seeing from the satellite data, that the climate system is very insensitive. The warming we've seen in the oceans, of the upper almost 1 kilometer of the oceans, of the global ocean, has only been, it's been less than 0.2 of a degree C in 50 years. And that is a very small number, and it's less than what any of the climate models are predicting for warming of the ocean. I mean, I think we are seeing some of the warming effects of more CO2. It just is the warming is not nearly as strong as everybody expected. And what that means for the future is that future warming will not be as strong as expected.
Yep. I thank you very much for being available to us this afternoon, because I know it's late where you are, but thank you very much for your incisive data and your analysis. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much. Dr. Roy Spencer, Principal Research Scientist at the University of Alabama. He's been a Senior Climate Scientist for NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Temperatures are his business. And what he has discovered, real-world measurements show far less heat is being trapped in the Earth's atmosphere than the alarmist computer models predict, and far more heat is escaping into space than the alarmist computer models predict as well. The science is not settled, all right? It is falling down around their ears. You know, the electronic media, the newspaper press, and you've got various get-up organisations love to sort of circulate their facts, their own understanding of science, and criticism of programs like this one for not giving you the facts. Well, I couldn't have thought of anyone in the world more involved in the regular measurement of temperatures on the planet than Dr. Roy Spencer, PhD from the University of Alabama. He's been awarded the NASA Exceptional Scientific Achievement Gong. Like, at the end of the day, who do you want to talk to? Do you want to talk to the gospel, someone with the gospel truth, or do you want to talk to someone on the fringes? This bloke is not on the fringes. And you heard what he had to say. The global warming alarmism is not equivalent to the kind of models that are now appearing. That is, the data is showing that the alarmism is not warranted. This is basically, in summary, what he had to tell us. We shouldn't be alarmed, and we shouldn't accept politicians in this country, as they do in this federal government, handing out brochures that say there will be nowhere to hide. How dare they carry on with this scaremongering and therefore whack a tax on all of us and expect us to be competitive with the rest of the world. They are joking. 131873, which is why I can only implore you even further to get to Canberra on the 16th of August and have your say, put democracy back into our parliament, and let the politicians know as they return for their winter recess exactly what you think about their